What is going on, guys? We are back playing some more Surviving with Create 0.3, and today we are going to be setting up the Mechanical Crafter, which is a multi-block structure of varying shape and size depending on what you actually want to use it for. Now there's two different reasons that you would set up the Mechanical Crafter. The first one being you simply want to craft one of the blocks that create offers that does not fit into a regular crafting table because it's got a super convoluted shape for the recipe and might actually need more than a 3x3 grid to make. The other reason is that you might be wanting to just do some automated crafting of some simple vanilla recipes, and they allow you to do that too. Now they're super simple to work with. You're simply going to set them up for whatever recipe you want, input some rotational power, and you're going to have the recipe you want popping right out of them wherever you want it to come out. And it's not complicated at all, but you need to make sure you set it up right for what you want to actually make. And today we're going to be making what I think most of you probably are going to be here for, which is going to be the crushing wheels, because the recipe for these, if we take a look, requires the Mechanical Crafter, and I'm sure you can see why. It actually requires 21 spaces in a crafting grid to be able to make, and we're obviously not getting that out of a regular 3x3. Now we're also going to be going over how to make the rotation speed controller, and you might be thinking, well, it doesn't really look like you need it for this, but you do for the integrated circuit. And this one's even weirder looking than the crushing wheel setup, so we're going to be going over how you can actually use the crushing wheel setup to make this instead of having to tear it down and set up one that's simply 9 crafting spaces in this weird setup. So we'll be going over all of that today, but I actually do want to say one thing that you guys might have already noticed if you are super observant, but that is that we have a shader pack in here right now, and honestly I think it looks absolutely amazing. I mean, look outside right now. It's so ominous out. I don't want to go out there. It's looking pretty sketchy out there. I want to stay in here with the nice warm lighting, the glow of the lanterns, But honestly, if you guys saw, I put up a poll a little bit ago asking if you guys would want to see shaders in here, because it's been requested that we actually include these since it's already so awesome looking with Create in general. I absolutely love the visuals of it, and we've been trying to have a nice looking base for this series. So I thought, you know what, I'll listen to you guys, I'll go all out, and about 80% of you said you wanted this over a poll with like 1,500 votes. So here we are. Now, a couple things. I obviously want you guys to give me your opinion. If you guys wanted it and you decide you hate it, let me know. If you guys thought you were going to hate it and you'll like it, also let me know. We'll go based off that. We can totally ditch it in the series. I have no issue. And if we ever run into a position where we are not getting 60 FPS anymore, then we'll ditch it too. I don't really know how it's going to turn out when we end up having a ton of stuff around here all running at once, but right now we're getting some clean FPS, so we're good to go. Now we're going to jump into the crafting, so if you guys do not want to watch that portion of the video and you want to jump to the actual, action portion of the video where we set stuff up, you can feel free to skip to the next section. No hard feelings. There's also a timestamp in the description. But joke's on you guys, because today we're dealing with only crafting since it's the Mechanical Crafter. Horrible joke, I know, but in all seriousness, majority of today's episode is going to be either crafting or setting up stuff to do more crafting. So unfortunately, you're kind of screwed if you don't want to deal with crafting, but that was in the title of the video, so that's kind of on you at this point. But here's everything we need for today's episode. Now, the Mechanical Crafters are actually a very small portion of this, but we are going to need a few things to actually set them up and get them running, because you do have to input rotational power into them. So the first thing that we are going to be making is actually what we did the mechanical mixer for, and that is going to be making brass casing. Now, each one of these recipes makes 4, just like the andesite casing, which is super nice because it requires 2 brass sheets per. If you do not have brass sheets, you need to have both the things that we set up in the last 2 episodes, being the mechanical press to make sheets and the mechanical mixer to make the brass. So now that we have these, we are able to make our 8 brass casing. There we go. That actually should be the perfect amount for what we need today. But now if we look at the Mechanical Crafter recipe, we can see that it takes the brass casing, which we have, 2 cogwheels, a crafting table, and an electron tube. Now the electron tube is interesting because you can see right here the recipe seems pretty simple. Polished rose quartz, redstone torch, and an iron nugget. But the polished rose quartz requires sandpaper polishing, on a rose quartz, which is nether quartz with 8 redstone dust. So this is a little bit of a sort of lengthy process to make, which is interesting, but the way we do this is using these right down here. And so we're going to pull out 64 redstone, 8 nether quartz, and then sand and paper. And this should give us the exact amount we need for today, but we simply throw the paper in here with some sand, we get out sandpaper, we throw the nether quartz in there, fill this whole thing up, we get out our 8 rose quartz. We're going to need 7 electron tubes, and then something else, I believe the rotation speed controller is going to require 1 polished rose quartz, so we're going to need 8 in total. But the way you make these, if we look at the sandpaper, is that it can be used to polish materials. And it can automatically be used using the deployer, but we're going to do it manually today. And you can do this by either holding the rose quartz in our offhand or throwing it on the ground. And each sandpaper should get 8 polishes. So if we throw it in our offhand and then we right click and hold it down, you actually get the eating noise. And you can see we process through it pretty darn quickly. Now, just to give you guys an example, if we were to finish off and throw this on the ground, just in case you don't want to put it in your offhand, if we right click, you can see that we just pick up one piece at a time. And again, I still think it's super weird that it sounds like we're eating it, but you know what? That's totally fine. People did weirder things back in the day with things that are precious gems or materials. If you guys didn't know, that's how they actually tested for real gold. They would bite it because real gold is actually malleable and fool's gold is not. So those guys would legitimately bite into stuff to see if it was actually real gold. So maybe we are really biting into this. Who's to say? But now we have the 8 polished rose quartz that we need. So we are able to make the electron tubes. We simply have to grab out our 7 redstone torches and 7 iron nuggets. And here we go. We make the 7 tubes. And then I believe we have our crafting tables, our cog wheels. And here we go. We get 3 mechanical crafters per, and we need 21 for the crushing wheels. Now, obviously, you're going to need varying amounts depending on what you're trying to make, but you are able to use covers to adjust the available mechanical crafters to make sure you can craft other recipes. So, like I said, we'll be showing that with the rotation speed controller component crafting that we're doing later on. Now we are also going to be grabbing out all the rest of this stuff right here, the stone, 4 oak planks, and 16 andesite alloy. This adds up to 21, so that might be a dead giveaway that it is what we need for the 2 crushing wheels. So that's what we're going to throw in the mechanical crafters. Then we are going to have 36 brass nuggets, and these are simply going to be used to craft 12 crafter slot covers. Now these are going to be used in the case where you have more mechanical crafters connected than you actually need, so you need to cover some to allow the process to actually continue functioning. So we're going to make 12 of those. The number of these that you need will vary depending on how many you need to cover, but we'll be going over that later, so you'll be able to understand how many you need depending on what you're doing once we do that. Now the last things that we need are going to be all this stuff right here, simply so we can actually set all the stuff up. We're going to be making belts using this dried kelp. So if you guys don't know, you are going to use 6 dried kelp to make a mechanical belt. And the mechanical belt is going to allow us to connect shafts and transfer rotational power between them. So we'll be using that today. And then we'll be using the shafts and a small cogwheel to actually do the powering of our mechanical crafters. And the last stuff that we have in here is going to be the last brass casing, which we didn't use yet, the 2 shafts we pulled out, and then the integrated circuit, which we're going to make using the mechanical crafters that we're going to go over how to set up in a little bit. So I believe we now have everything we need to go over and start setting them up. And you can see it's daytime out right now, just so you guys get an idea of how the shaders actually look. But we're going to be setting this up right over here. And this is going to use up the remaining power from our water wheels. If we look over here, we currently have 768 stress units left, and boy, do these use up a lot. So I feel like the first thing that's important for us to cover is simply the stress unit usage of these, because it's a little bit more complicated than with the other setups. Now, if we hover over the mechanical crafters, you can see the stress impact is low. It's 2 times the RPM that the system is running at. Now, there is no minimum speed that you need to run these at. the speed is simply going to determine how quickly they craft the item. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, when the speed is low, the craft takes forever. You're going to see today, because we're going to be running it at 16 RPM, that even at that speed, it's super, super slow. So obviously, if you're doing a one-off craft like we are today, it's not too bad. But if you were automating this in a system and doing a craft over and over and over again, you definitely would not want to skimp out on the rotational power. Now, the important thing to consider is it is 2 times the RPM per mechanical crafter. So when we're running 21 today, it is going to be the RPM times 2 times 21. And I feel like they do a very poor job of indicating that, because even once you place these, they are simply going to show with the engineering goggles, when you look over them, the consumption per mechanical crafter. And obviously all of them are spinning, so it's going to consume a lot of power. I believe today ours consumes 672. So we're running it using the 16 RPM from the water wheels over here. We're not using the 32 for the mechanical mixer, because otherwise we would actually be exceeding our limit on stress units for our system over here. So we're going to be setting it up right over here, and we are simply going to place them down in the exact way that the mechanical crafting recipe looks like for this. So we're going to do a 3x3 and then 3 jutting off each side. So we'll start here. We'll simply place them down, and then we're going to come all the way down, all the way back up, all the way back down, and 3 right here. And there we go. So these are the mechanical crafters. You simply place them down in the exact shape of the recipe, and each one of these is going to correspond to a single item. Now, the important thing to note is that we are going to actually need, I just totally spaced out on this, but you actually need a wrench to be able to adjust these. So to make a wrench, we need 3 gold sheets, a cogwheel, and a stick. So you guys get to see some firsthand crafting right now. So we will be able to make some gold sheets right here. We have extra cogwheels left over because obviously we, much like Boy Scouts, are always prepared, but apparently we don't have a stick. So we are super advanced in some facets, but we are extremely not advanced in others. So we'll just smash these 3 ingots and we can be on our way, because we are going to need a wrench to actually adjust these in multiple different aspects. And one of them is something that I feel like a lot of people definitely don't touch on. So there we go. We now have the wrench. This is going to be important for a lot of different things, but this is going to be one of the first situations you run into where it's critical. So when we look at these, you can see that they have arrows on them. It's a little bit harder to see when you look at the ones in the middle, but if we look at the ones at the top, they have arrows on them. And by right-clicking with the wrench, you spin these arrows around. And what these need to do is, in the end, connect all these mechanical crafters to one central point. It's going to be the directions the items flow in. It doesn't matter how you do it, but it's going to be important that they're all connected. So what I'm going to do is rotate these so they all come down, and we're just going to keep doing that all the way over. And the way you actually place them down, like you saw, is what's going to determine how they connect. So if you don't want to make a wrench or you don't have it, you can actually avoid it by placing them down in a super weird way, but it's so much easier to just wrench them. So what we're doing here is we're basically making it so that the side ones push into the center, and then they push from the top down right to here. And the item is going to pop out right at the bottom here where you can see the last arrow is pointing. Now, if we were to have a chest directly below this or anything that could accept an item, it would pop into that. But if you have nothing there, it's simply going to pop right out. So this is how you would go about automating something, having it put into some form of storage or some conveyor of some sort. But if there's obviously nothing there that it can go into, it pops right out, which is totally fine for our one-off crafting. So now these are all connected. Something to note about these, and I'm actually going to come behind them to show you guys very quickly, is right here, you can see that these are each separated, right? They're each their own block. If you take out the wrench, you can actually connect them. So if we were to right click with the wrench right here, these will now be connected. And you can see that on the front, they are now connected to a singular block. You connect them on the back. This is going to be useful for automating certain recipes because these now have a shared inventory. you're able to insert items into these automatically using things like a hopper. But if you have them connected and you insert with a hopper, it will actually fill both of these. So for certain recipes, that can be extremely useful since they do have a shared inventory. Now we don't need that for this, so we're going to disconnect them so it all looks nice, but that's something that you might want to take note of if you're using this for automated crafting. So we'll just fill this back up. And now the important part of this is getting the rotational power to this, because as you can see, it is very similar to the mechanical mixer in that you need to input the rotational power using a cogwheel. Now you have the option of using a large cogwheel or a small cogwheel. I'm going to use a small one because I think it looks visually more appealing, but I can show you guys if we pull out the extra large cogwheel that we have, the two differences. If I can actually have some room to place this down, I believe if we just place it right there, it would actually work, but I think it does not look very visually appealing. So if we were to use the small cogwheel and right click, I think it's actually a lot nicer. As you can see, this doesn't really look nice, but you could use either if you wanted to. So we're going to use the small cogwheel, and we need to use the 16 RPM that we got over here, not the 32. So the way we're going to do this is using belts, and we are actually going to transfer it from behind here over right here. And it's going to turn this cogwheel and turn this whole thing on. And obviously, because these are all connected, it's going to apply to the entirety of this machine. So all we're going to do is use the diamond axe and just hack out this area right back here. And then I'm actually going to just put down some wood right back here so that it looks a little bit nicer. And if we can get in there, grab all the stuff out. Apparently we're not getting that wood back, but whatever. Actually, no, we need that wood back for our crafting recipe for today. So I guess for now, what we're going to do is take the shafts that we have, and we're going to put one down over here, which is connecting to the cogwheel. And then all we do is grab out the mechanical belt, we right click on one, and you can see that it shows you a graphic of where you can connect it to and where it's going to be running. We simply right click there, and here we go. You can see that it now places down the mechanical belt, and this can be used as a conveyor for items if you wanted to, but it also just conveys rotational power, and it's going to make it turn in the same direction at the same speed as the supplier of the power over here. So you can see now this is turning at 16 RPM. The direction does not matter for the mechanical crafters, which is a godsend. You don't need to worry about making it go in any way. You simply input the power. So it's actually good to go. Now, something to note is the mechanical belts. These actually do have a stress impact. These are one of the few things when it comes to moving rotational power that actually has an impact. And if we look at the belt, you can see that it even says on here it has a low stress impact of 1 times the RPM. So right now we are actually inducing through this whole system, I believe 688 stress units, since it would be 672 for these, for the 21 times 2 times 16, which is putting it at 32 stress units each. And then this is going to be 16 RPM times 1, so 16 total. So we can see over here that we are almost maxing this out. We are at 90% network stress, which is fine. We're not going to use anything else. So obviously we want this going as quickly as we can have it, and it should be good to go now. So we're going to craft the first thing that we want for today, which is going to be the crushing wheels. And the recipe right here, we're simply going to throw in, which is going to be the 16 andesite alloy, the 4 planks, and the stone of whatever choosing you want. So we'll grab these out, and we can just throw the andesite alloy around the outsides here. And then we will fill in the center with the oak planks. And lastly, the stone. Now, once we put this in there, because it's already got rotational power, it is simply going to start. And you'll see now that everything starts filling in, and the pattern that I described before is going in place. They went to the center, and now they're coming down. So obviously, if you have this set up in a super convoluted way, they're going to take a super weird path to get to the finished crafting portion, but I think it actually looks pretty cool. So when this gets put into an automated system, it looks absolutely fantastic. The visuals are just amazing. And then when you're done, like I said, it pops out right at the bottom. Now, obviously, there is a problem here because the mechanical crafters function in a way where every slot needs to be filled for them to actually start going. Now, two things can happen. Once they're all filled, if you do not have a valid recipe and they start going, the items for the recipe, well, I guess not actually the recipe, but the items that are in there, since it's not a recipe, will simply pop out. They're invalid. Once they get to the end, they will simply pop out because it's not going to work. But you will not be able to run this like it is right now if you do not need all mechanical crafters. So they have these crafter slot covers for scenarios where you do not need all of them, but you simply don't want to tear it down. Now, chances are once you already have all 21 of these set up, it's going to be sufficient for mechanical crafting pretty much everything you need. And a perfect example of that is the component of the rotation speed controller that requires the mechanical crafters, and that's the integrated circuit. So obviously this looks really different than what we currently have, but it only needs 9 of them. And as you can see, this is essentially the lower, like between 1/3 and 1/2 of our current setup. So if we were to use mechanical covers on all the other sections of it and then fill this in, it would actually go. So the first thing that we are going to do is put down, if I could actually pull this stuff out, we get the items all on our hotbar right here. We need to take the block of lapis lazuli, throw it over here, and let it get crushed first before we actually do this. So there we go, we have the lapis sheet we need. But now if we look at the recipe right up here, we can see that it's the sheet at the top, polished rose quartz, and then some gold nuggets and redstone. So we put this in, put in the redstone, put in the gold nuggets, and finally the polished rose quartz. But you can see it doesn't go. Right? It's got the power, it's got the items. It doesn't go though, because the covers aren't on. So what do? We simply right click with these covers right here. And you can see that the visuals are actually very similar to what pops up behind the items once the automated crafting starts. And the minute we put this down, it should start going. So there you go. You can see it pops up the same visuals behind them and it starts going. So this is how it's going to run. And it's going to essentially try and pull items from all of these. As you saw, you get a delay. That is a reason why you obviously in automated crafting want it to be the exact size for the exact recipe you need. But once it gets down to the bottom portion, it finishes up. We're going to get out our circuit and we'll be good to go. So there we are. We now have that, and simply right click with an empty hand on these crafters to get them back. And now we're good as gold. So you might just want a chest, somewhere near it to put these crafters, the crafter slot covers in case you run into a situation where you need it like that. But our setup's good to go, and we can craft the rotation speed controller. So all we got to do is throw it in here. We can craft it. And now we have two things that we'll be going over in a future episode. Chances are next episode, we're going to go over the crushing wheels simply because I want to process my ore. It's painful letting this stuff sit in here, even though I really don't need it yet. But I want to process it. I want to get it going. So we'll be going over that next episode. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to that. And again, let me know your comments now that you have seen these shaders in action. I think they look phenomenal. I think if we take a step outside, as long as nothing's going to kill us, I think everything looks amazing. I think the whole base looks awesome. I'm super happy with how it turns out. I love the lighting and everything. And these shaders aren't even actually on super high settings. I believe it's the BSL shaders, which I don't think is the most common one people use, but I love it. You got the movement of the trees and the leaves and everything. It looks super cool. So again, let me know what you guys think. If you like it, if you don't like it. I know we did the poll, but we hadn't actually seen it in action yet. And I really don't want it to detract from the series. I know that there are a ton of amazing YouTubers out there right now doing tutorial episodes on this mod. And obviously, if you're looking for just a tutorial, their series might be, more optimal for what you want. But I know a lot of you guys are here because you want the information, and I really don't want the shaders or anything to make it difficult for you guys to see what's going on or make it, detract from the main information of the video. So if that's the case, again, please let me know. This is a totally fluid thing. We can move it, change it, alter it, whatever you guys want throughout the series. So again, comment what you guys think and be looking forward to the next episode of the series, which will be most likely going over the crushing wheels and ore processing. But that's it for me for today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you later.